In this video tutorial, we're going to look at new Arc XP CLI command to troubleshoot a bundle error in your website. We released this documentation for the new command, vlogs, that you can run any website in various environments that we're going to look at to get a request ID to pass on to the new CLI command to see what's going on in your render runtime. If you haven't been using Arc XP CLI, which has a few other commands as well, you can easily install with simple npm install Arc XP CLI package. You can obtain your credentials as you usually get from Dev Center, which will give you the contents of this file that we will be copying, pasting to a special location, and your CLI is good to go. We're gonna look at our CLI command and a few of the different ways to run these commands. Let's start with installing our npm install globally Arc XP CLI package. This is already installed in my computer, but I'm gonna repeat the steps. After that, Arc XP command will be ready. Right now I did create the empty environment file. The message that shows here is it's not liking the permissions, that is too broad. So we're gonna be updating this. But first, let's fill the contents of this file. So we switch back to our Arc admin. We go to Developer Center. And from here, we will create a new, at least minimum read-only Developer Center token. We're gonna give a description to our token. And then contents of the .env file is already going to be constructed here. We will just copy paste into our home folder .arcxp CLI folder and to .env file. So we'll save this. Once we try CLI again, it's going to give the same error that it's not going to be liking the permissions. Again, we run arcxp CLI command without any arguments. It will launch an interactive mode, which you can select and browse different options. At the end of our selection, this is going to print out the one-line command if you don't want to use the interactive UI. We're going to pause the CLI side for a second. We're going to go to our page builder editor. There are a few test pages that we created that intentionally and randomly errors out. But let me talk about that for a second. So this can be any page, any article detail page, home page, or anything sort. This is just a home page looking page that we have a block, this particular one, that uses a content source. Oh, I think it's hard-coded inside. So we're going to look at the code for this block. We'll notice that it's using a content source that is not requiring any configuration on the editor side, but the content source itself has a randomized mathematical logic to error out sometimes. So if we refresh this preview, in some cases, we should observe that block to fail. Right there. This is just simulating an error on the server side. If you look at the code, this is our block custom card. And in here, we can see it's using simple content source. Usually customers don't start with handling all of different error scenarios, something like this. For instance, if it fails on the content source, it gracefully renders an error message we're seeing in the editor UI. But more often than not, like this block doesn't exist. Somewhere here, code assumes that this content will be always provided. And with this, there's going to be unhandled exceptions. That's going to fail this React rendering altogether. And that's usually results this block to be completely empty in the front. In editor UI, we show the quarantined error state with saying like there's some error while rendering this block. But the end user or readers don't see that state. They usually see just like an empty box. So under the hood, React render might be completely failing, or in this case, it's being gracefully handled, but still there's an error that we want to get to it, right? So if you look at the content source, it's very simple. It's just, I guess like 40% of the time it produces an error with 500. And this is usually how we bubble up errors from content sources to upstream request tree. If there's no error, obviously payload returns with like, two properties. One of them is a static greeting that is displayed in the front end. And there's a timestamp that we just, generate here. And obviously this failure is just simulated, but this can be something like you may have a network fetch and the downstream or third party or Arc APIs you're interacting with might be returning with like invalid permissions or like 403, 404 content not found, or even application errors on the target APIs. Any of those errors may result with network call to be failing, and that may be bubbling up within the content source into either the React components, or if the content source was configured as a global content source, it would cause the whole page to completely fail. Let's get to how do we see the error, right? So we open the preview. This initially on the server side render, if you guys have noticed, like, it failed for a second, and then in the client side re-render, it succeeded. So we're looking at the internal arcpublishing.com domains. This means that this render is directly happening at the page builder level. There's no CDN in front of it. This is a protected URL. Obviously, this is for development purposes. Your real readers or users don't reach to this URLs. But what we're going to show in the next section exists in both internal preview URLs as well as CDN URLs. The way we try to get the bottom of the render runtime logs for this particular session, let's say if it's failed, oh, we had one failure, but maybe server side was still failing, but the client side rehydration covered it. We're going to be looking at our developer tools network tab, and we can filter to see only top level page requests. This is the page request that we created, and we're specifically interested in a response header called x-arc-pb-request-id. There's going to be another value for this outside of CDN, but this is the ID that we need to troubleshoot what went wrong in the server side failure. Again, this failure recovered with client side rehydration. But if it's an error that is persistent, it may completely blank out this feature, or it may render an error state if you have a graceful error. Let's say like a fallback content in the case of failure. We will switch to our new vlogs command, and it will ask the request ID for server-side render instance that we want to troubleshoot or debug. So with this, we get the whole session from start to finish, all of the log lines. This includes like logical messages. It doesn't have to be just errors. Essentially, this is the error that we want to see. That 90% of the time, the stack trace points to where exactly the failure is happening. This is on the fetch method within this file in these lines. And there's often error messages that contain the network failures. If this was, let's say, an Axios call to an API, and if the API failed with, let's say, invalid token, or maybe rate limiting like 429, we would be seeing those details here. As I mentioned the beginning of the call, we can see the full single line command that we can easily run. We know the request ID is dynamic, so next time we don't have to stay within the interactive Arc XP CLI interface. We can just directly interact with just copy pasting IDs for a page. So I want to go back to the point we were looking at the internal preview URLs, which this is often useful if you're working with a specific deployment. Let's say like a deployment that is not live yet in your environment. Obviously, we're working on Sandbox, so it's fairly safe to promote a bundle in development mode, but you may have like multiple developers working on different preview deployments. You can designate the deployment parameter, a valid one. Obviously, I just made up 200, but that would render the page with the bundle code changes. And if there are errors or fixes, you can easily just grab the request ID generated from this request and view the logs. This feature is already available in all environments for all of our customers. We want to go back to viewing this page from behind CDN. This would be whether you have like pre-production domains configured for your environment. You can always use Arc provided CDN URLs. So you go to your delivery tiles. By default, it will open the site settings, and you could, we've been using K-Arc site for our tests. And we can use this URL. This is always the default domain that is provided for every single site provisioned with Arc XP. And this will render our site. So in this one, we're going to enter our same page URI. This time, there's not going to be like PF path prefix or website or MXID or anything. This is literally just real website. So this will render our page. But obviously, since CDN is in front, there's going to be more resiliency layers that if, let's say, the page is completely failing, CDN always recovers that from the last successful cache. So it's going to be harder to see errors from CDN. But let's say we spotted an error. Same headers will be present in CDN as well. So we'll refresh our page. We're looking at our network tab with document filter. And the first one will show us PB request ID header. You may notice that there are two PB request ID headers. This is actually one header with two values in it. Some browsers choose to show that in two separate lines. Often what you want is the first one. The second one is the resolver. One of them is render. One of them is routing. So vast majority of our customers, the resolver request ID is not useful. Most of the time, page builder engine render request ID, that is the one that you will want to look at. So if we want to repeat our CLI command with new request ID, we will see this was a session that basically didn't have any errors. You can see like everything looks normal. You may choose to increase logging to understand how your page gets rendered, how is your cache behaves. This is a good example that, we're just like console logging the successful output of that same content source. In this case, there's no error. Everything looks okay. We built the view logs command so you don't have to fly blind when debugging production issues. This is a very lightweight CLI tool. It's fast and designed to fit right into your developer workflow. And as always, we want to know what you think and what else you'd like to see in the CLI to improve your developer experience.